Welcome, everyone. My name is Maren Rojas. If you were expecting Lou and I to do this together again, I apologize on his behalf. He had an engagement that he had to take care of. So you have me solo, but we are so excited to have this the sixth of 6 series Tuesdays with you. Welcome back. We want to start each of these 6 sessions in the same way, which is with a short framing of how we think about this particular vital connection skill and how we approach the topic, and put a spotlight on your own thinking, who you work with, whether that's individuals or groups. We do hope that this can serve as a pause in your day. It's 20 minutes for you to ground yourself, reflect, feel the power of thinking about connections in your own work and the people in your lives, and also maybe to come out of the webinar with just a little extra energy, enthusiasm, and maybe some extra tools in your toolbox of the skills that you already use to do the tremendous work that you're doing. The caring adult relationship serves as the most protective factor in a child's resilience. And this vital connection, this adult and child connection, is something we all have the power to nurture and harness. It's potentially the greatest skill set that we have at our fingertips to develop. And it really doesn't require anything: equipment, facilities, curriculum. All it requires is your willingness to invest in it. And though we can't always see the impact of love, we must believe that it matters. Each vital connection is not simply something a child wants. It's a need. A want implies that you can say no, but a need is like water. You have to have it. You can't get through life without it. And when we meet a young person's needs, we really do something vital for them. So for this session, I just did your short framing. I want to tell you a story. Then we'll talk a little bit more about what the vital connection is, how it promotes resilience, and then maybe a couple practical ways we've seen it work in the world. So for our story. In the early 2000s, my colleague and the founder of Edgework, Lou, was working with Serious Fun Network, helping them develop a week-long residential camp program with one of the largest safari companies in Southern Africa. The idea was they're building these week-long camps to serve as a catalyst for local children, to connect them to year-long services outside the camp that could support education and long-term employment. One of the first sites that was created was in the Okavango Delta in Botswana, and it is an incredibly remote area of the bush. In their first year, they were primarily working with children that were living in 5 or 6 orphanages that are around the capital city of Maren. And this is what would happen. They drive out, collect the kids, they transport them through a 5-6 hour trek to the bush. They get out of all the Jeeps, count them up. Then they'd have this week-long camp safari experience, like really plug in it, again, to connect them to those year-round services. And then they take the kids at the end of the camp back to the orphanages, drop them off. Hopefully they get connected. So one of the camps was kicking off, as you do. They get to camp, they take attendance, and all of a sudden they realize they're 1 camper more than should be on the attendance list. The young boy was there, and the counselors quickly realized he was a camper who had been there some weeks before. And they said, "How did you get here?" Because he wasn't on any of the transportation. And he explained this gigantic trek. Mind you, it was a 5-6 hour drive through the bush to get to this camp. He explained this unbelievably long trek on foot that he took to get back to this camp. And he said, "Why?" The counselor said, "Why did you do this?" And he said, I just want to come back to camp." There's a harsh reality we have to face when we're working with young people, especially those that are dealing with some of the most tremendous and challenging adversities and barriers, is that no matter how good we are, no matter how good our services are, no matter how good our programs are, whether we're teaching or coaching or mentoring or counseling, sometimes what we offer is just simply not enough. And so this vital connection skill that we're going to talk about today, this last one, is something we just call commitment. It's based on this really complex thing that life is hard, and that some people, what they need to get through that day, that moment, is just not what we can provide. We talked last week about how we can connect young people to other caring adults. Maybe those caring adults can help that child through. But the reality is commitment challenges us to look at ourselves, to look at our intervention, our program, our services, first of all, for what it does, but then secondly, and I think more critically, what it doesn't. What do we not provide? What do we not do? And that's not in any way to diminish the outcomes that we achieve, because we do achieve so many positive, impactful outcomes in young people's lives. But to appreciate that we may not be meeting all the needs of all of our young people. And, you know, you could say, maybe these are the people who slip through the cracks. Maybe they're the ones who fail out. Maybe they're the ones who get excluded for whatever criteria that they're not living up to that doesn't allow them to continue to participate in your program. Maybe it's just that your program has an ending, a finite ending, and they graduate out. Young people, they have an incredibly creative way of showing what they need from us. And it often manifests itself in challenging behavior. We've been amazed at the camps and the programs and the things that we've worked with in the past, Lou and I at Edgework, is that young people progress, they grow, they start to really develop, and they're moving so well along in whatever services and programs that are being provided. And yet graduation starts to rear its head around the corner, and these young people seem to fall apart. It's 2 steps forward and 24 steps back. And all of a sudden this young person is in the counselor's eyes, they've regressed. But the reality is, if we see it through the child's eyes, maybe their behavior is a way of saying something like, you may be ending this experience, but I'm not done yet. Great. Thanks for this happy graduation celebration. But what do I do tomorrow? I need more time. I need more you. There's been a lot of resilience research in the last 20 years. That's been investigating, it's mostly been interviews, qualitative, anecdotal surveys, talking to young people, talking to adults, reflecting on their young lives and their passage through. How did they get through those challenges, those barriers, those huge obstacles and adversities that faced? And really not that they're surviving as adults, but they're actually thriving now. How did they do that? And time again, the overwhelming percentage of adults that will say, they'll look back on their lives and they say, I got through because of someone, a caring adult, a program, a thing, a service that caught them, that helped them through that. And so that's often the real difference. So, and I think this is a big so, what can we do? We have four things that I want to leave you with. And some of them may sound repetitive, and I want to make sure I loop them into some of our previous connection skills. First, don't graduate your people. Well, this may be all fine and good if we had unlimited resources, people, funding, et cetera, and time. But are there creative ways to not graduate your people? We know this isn't feasible for all programs and services, but what would it be to creatively flex or bend or adapt to extend the needs and meet the needs of the people that need us the most? I mean, for example, we have programs where elementary school, it ends in elementary school, and then they move on to middle school and that service is over. What if we just extended that through middle school, through high school? Again, we can't always do it. It's not always feasible, but what if? And that's where I want us to play a little bit, is in the what if. There's a mentoring program called Thread that's based out of Baltimore that hooks young people up that are really, really struggling academically and gets them into tutoring, mentoring, and helps them along a pathway. And they said, you know what? They can't just graduate. They actually need more. So they made this 10-year commitment to 5 students that for 10 years, they were going to extend what they were doing with them because they knew that's actually where the impact happened. And again, I'm not saying everyone could do this. I'm saying, but what if? So our second, listen for and uncover what needs may be present. As we get to make time at the right time, our first vital connection skill, as we start to believe that the child can succeed and help them believe that they can succeed themselves, their own self-talk, as we get to know their story more, the fact is we're going to uncover needs. We're going to uncover those things that become the thing, hey, maybe we can do this. I think about transportation. I've seen schools, and we think about the academic space, that open up early because they're starting to realize that caregivers, they have a third shift, and the third shift doesn't get off until the morning. And that ability to get their child to school, get them fed, get them ready, is diminished based on the normal average school year. And some schools have adapted that. They've created this morning shift. Maybe it's food. Maybe it's clothing, whether it's clean or they just need more of it. There's a really interesting story about a principal in West Side High in New Jersey. And he was starting to evaluate the truancy in some of his high school students. And he found these repeat offenders. And what he found out, the need was that they didn't have clean clothing to come to school. And they were getting bullied and harassed and teased by their peers. You know what he did? He bought 5 washers and 5 dryers. And that's where he started. And it became so popular at the school that they have upwards of a dozen now of each. So he started a laundromat, because that's, of course, not the primary function of the school, but that's what the students needed to be able to attend, to break through that barrier. A third way, and we've spoken to this, and I think we can't highlight this enough, this concept of alumni. People who've gone through your program, through your service, moved on in life. We talked last week about connecting our young people with those alumni, but what if we checked in with our alumni and we did some mapping of where our alumni were at 18, at 20, at 30? How are the ones who are thriving? How are they thriving? What are the things that they got out of what we did with them that's helping them succeed? And for those who are struggling, and this is where we can really dig a little bit deeper, what are they struggling with? What didn't happen for them along the way that maybe we can discover the paths that help them to not be successful. And we can pick those things apart. Maybe we can identify those things and actually solve for them. Maybe. Again, this is this last skill is about what if. And then finally, perhaps we could bridge the gap, the what's next. And this is more than last week we talked about facilitating caring adults to more young people, or young people to caring adults. This is after they leave us, when they go to the next thing. What is the next thing? As you get towards the end of that program experience, what if you engage with caregivers? What if you engage with the next people in their lives to help them bridge that gap? What would you need to know? What kind of programs and services are out there? But also, what do they need to succeed along that pathway? There's a really great documentary out there called Understanding Transition Age Youth. It's a 4-part series, at least you can find it on YouTube these days. And this is following transition age youth that are out of the juvenile justice system, out of the child welfare system and foster care system, and what it's taken for them to navigate that. And so that's a really interesting, I think they really push us to think beyond, this is what we offer, this is what we do, we have these great outcomes, but what about those young people who need more? And what does it mean for the skills that we taught them here to travel with them and be transferable? And who can we also connect them to? One of the organizations highlighted in that documentary is Freedom from Youth, and they were based out of Santa Barbara. They help young juvenile offenders then make that transition. What does that transition look like? Job, steady housing, also vital connections in their lives with other people who care about them and invested them outside of the juvenile justice system. We want to really help them continue that step forward. And listen, if this vital connection skill seems more difficult, if it seems just more with a capital M or R-E, I get it. It's challenging because the first 5 connection skills, make time at the right time, believe the child can succeed, know the child's story, have great conversations, and connect them to other caring adults. I'm sure those are all within the scope of what you already do. And we can, like we said in the framing, we can nurture and harness that power of those to create more for those young people. And this one, again, challenges still closely what we're doing. We may or may not be able to do it, but the question is, what if? What if we could extend? What if we could stretch a little bit? A lot of the organizations that we know of, they end up doing this. They have this one mission and they start to see there are other needs. And so they add, not even necessarily programming, but they add stuff like the school that opens early to make sure the young kids get the hot breakfast or the meal or the ability to be dropped off by their parent or caregiver. I invite you to throw questions up in the Q&A, throw questions into chat. Of all the helpful practical strategies and skills you've discussed over this series, what are some of the ones that you have found the most useful personally? I think one of the most practical ones, Bill, has been about making time at the right time, because I think that's one of the things, that's one of the reasons we start with that, is because it's sort of a catalyst into so many of these other connections. If you make time, especially in the informal time around the programming, around the formal curriculum, you tend to open up opportunities to help a child with self-talk, help them believe in themselves, show and share how much you believe in them. And I think in addition to that, you start to know their story more. That sort of organic conversation, discussion starts to develop, which I think leads into connecting them to other adults. And also this last thing, really understanding where the gaps are. Let's see, when you enter into new connection with a young person, how do you prepare? That's a really, really good question. I think first, personally, I prepare by checking my assumptions at the door. A child that doesn't want to engage or participate is just not interested. I have to check that assumption at the door. Assuming that a child is late means that they don't really want to be there. I have to check that assumption at the door. So I think, first of all, just checking my assumptions at the door is my first way. Then I think, for me, there's really two ways, and I come from a more coaching background, but I think there's leading with inquiry and curiosity about who they are and what they're all about and what they want to get out of the experience. So that I feel like that gives agency over to children. But I also think deciding to have fun with young people really matters to young people. Deciding that what's fun for them is fun for me, and sharing what's fun for me is fun for them. So I think that's, for me, the preparation piece, checking my assumptions and leading with curiosity, and then just bringing that element of fun in. I want to really thank you on behalf of Lou and I. It has been a pleasure to meet with you with the last 6 weeks. We have really enjoyed it. We hope that you have some renewed energy, and in this one, feel a little bit of the creative juices running inside your head about what could be, the possibilities, and to be this caring adult, this protective factor for a young person. Appreciate your time.